La la la! Wow. Most of the time we're given instructions like this, and I have had this experience, and that was the way it was taught to me, so that's also part of why I'm making this video. Like, this is a scale, this is a chord, this scale fits this chord, now improvise and make music. There is some room for improvement there. The biggest problem with this is that it's an eyes first process, a outside in process, a top down process. I am out of analogies. The information is transferred over to you through abstract concepts and principles, which is a great way we've developed to share information. But when you learned colors, I know it's a standard example, but you saw the color and then you were told, this is blue, this is yellow, this is Tuscan sun, this is eggshell. If you're anything familiar with Rigbietto, which I'm sure you are, he played his son a bunch of notes, chords, and basically sounds, and then labeled them. Then he named them. And now the kid has ears the whole world is jealous of. And that should be the process. Start from your ears. It's normal that we are somewhat reluctant to train our ears or start from there. Our visual processing is much quicker than our auditory processing, and visual information is stored more easily and accurately in our long-term memory. But it can be trained, and it should be trained. Think of your musical being as consisting of 3 elements: your ears, your knowledge, and your motor skills or technique. These 3 elements have their roots sunk deeply in memory. That's where they get their nourishment and strength from. And out of these 3 elements, your creativity and your imagination grows and flourishes. These elements are part of an ecosystem, and every element of the ecosystem needs to be nurtured and strengthened, or else the system will falter, wither away, and turn brown like a leaf on a branch or a sad turd. Let's see what would happen in an imbalanced system. And to make it very clear, let's imagine that if we leave something out of the equation, we have 0 skills in it. So, for instance, if we have ears and knowledge, that would create richness, sophistication, and a deep understanding. But without motor skills, you wouldn't be able to transfer that from your instrument to an audience. Knowledge and motor skills, you'd be able to play some impressive things and maybe even play some complex sounding things. But because you can't quite hear that minor 6 arpeggio on the 5th of the dominant going to the 1, you can't really make very effective melodies. Melodies that strike a chord with the audience. It would lack coherence and it could be experienced as emotionless. There would always be an increased element of chance involved. Ears and motor skills, you'd be able to play great and have a very natural way of playing interesting melodies. But a lack of knowledge could stifle your creativity and you may at some point hit a wall. And why is that, you might ask? It's because of something called divergent thinking. Divergent thinking is one important index of imagination, and it simply means that you can come up with multiple uses for one object, including uses that the object is not originally designed for. Now, because you can't identify what you're doing or what elements you're using, you can't come up with new ways to use that material, and you wouldn't be able to connect concepts with each other. Obviously, in the real world, these things are not separate from each other, and you can't help but discover patterns and recognize things. It's literally a part of your design as a human to do that. And your ears can cover up for your knowledge to a point, and your knowledge can do the same for your ears. But there will always be a gap and fuzziness. However, if you combine and link all of the elements together, you're just supercharging everything. And here's my beef with a lot of the instruction out there, and I'm gonna stick with guitar because that's what I know. There's nothing wrong with practicing scales and arpeggios and triads and triad pairs and all of that stuff. It's necessary. And I do that too, and I have done it a lot. But they're mainly for learning your instrument. That's what that's for. You're learning to connect dots on your neck and learning to think. There's in comparison so little focus on the ear and connecting what you're practicing with the actual sound of it and having an understanding of how it all fits and works. That way the system is out of balance and you're faltering in your progress and development. But you can fix it if you start to focus on all different aspects. If you look up any exercises on counterpoint, you'll always read sing your counterpoint. Play one voice and sing the other, and then reverse. Yes, that's exactly it. Music is quite heavily based on your ears, so that might be a good place to start. To get to the next step, I'm going to get a little technical and scientific, but bear with me. I'm going to give you an overview and a breakdown of how improvisation works. I got this breakdown from Jeff Pressing's research paper called Improvisational Methods and Models. So, he states, improvisation is
an ordered union of event clusters generated by triggers at specific time points that instigate the movement patterns appropriate to effect intended musical actions.
So, in other words, improvisation is an ordered union of melodic cells, melodies, patterns, generated by triggers or chord symbols that instigate certain movement patterns, so your body does something. Each time point is thus the point at which decided action begins to be executed. Note that it is schemas for action that are triggered, not precise movement details. So a schema is a pattern of thought or behavior. A pattern is something you routinely and unconsciously do, so routines are being triggered. Let's go further. Here he's talking about skill development and the results of practice, which are improved efficiency, fluency, flexibility, capacity for error correction, expressiveness, inventiveness, and the achievement of coherence. The specific cognitive changes that allow these properties to develop in improvised musical behavior are considered to be
an increase in the memory store of objects, features, and processes in musical, acoustic, motor, and other aspects. An increase in accessibility of this memory store due to the buildup of redundant relationships between its constituents and the aggregation of these constituents into larger cognitive assemblies. An increasingly refined attunement to subtle and contextually relevant perceptual information.
So, in normal people words, the things we need to develop in order to achieve those results of practice are an increased memory store of melodies, chords, techniques, in one word, options, an increase in accessibility to this memory store due to a buildup of relationships and associations, and an increased sensitivity to what's happening inside of you and around you. He then states, the buildup and improved access to memory of points 1 and 2 is presumably central to any learning process. So by deeply embedding different components such as melodies, patterns, techniques, and having strong associations, we can come up with new ways of combining those components and access them freely. Because this can go however deeply we want to, very complicated interconnected knowledge structures may develop. So, what have we established? Improvisation relies on recognition and association. Routines are being triggered. And what we need to do is build up our memory store of options. Our options include melodies, chords, patterns, techniques, etc., etc., etc. Depending on how well this material is embedded and you have access to them in your memory, these things become automatic and routine, sort of. But we also need an auditory image of our options that we have stored as concepts. We need to be able to hear them in our minds and recognize them when we hear them externally. The stronger those mental connections are, the more fluent, flexible, and expressive we will become. So once again, your memory is the ground, that's the soil. Your ears, knowledge, and your technique or your motor skills all have their roots deeply embedded in memory, or they should have strong roots deeply embedded in your memory. And then your creativity and imagination and ability and expressiveness can really flourish at full power. And one of the most effective ways your brain and your memory store things is through association. So if you can associate a movement pattern or a motor skill with a sound, and you know what's going on, you have a mental concept of it, that's just, everything is full circle, and you can see I'm quite articulate. So I want to give you some personal practical recommendations for including everything and practicing in a more holistic way. Some of these things are things I learned from my teachers at the conservatory, or they're just things that I discovered by doing or noticing what worked better than others. You can do with it whatever you want. First, think of you yourself as being the instrument. Your actual instrument, guitar, saxophone, piano, drums, whatever it is just an extension. Your limbs are the end point. It should start from within your head. Learn functional hearing. So that means learning to hear how every degree of the scale functions in relation to the root. Sing chord tones over chord progressions. Study how to write and construct melodies. Learn about sentences and periods. Learn about form. Practice and develop your rhythmic understanding in your hearing without an instrument. We have a whole rhythmic training course that focuses on just that. I'll link to that below or up there. When you're playing, focus on rhythm and see your technique as a function of rhythm. Learn functional harmony, learn about voice leading, learn principles of counterpoint. These things will give everything a lot of substance and weight, and you can really make connections with everything, and you have historical background, and it just fortifies everything. Transcribe a lot. And I'm not saying this because we have a transcription channel. In fact, that would argue against us because you wouldn't need us. But really, I didn't do it as much as I should have done it when I was still studying. And through this channel, I really learned the effect of transcribing. And you just build up such a multitude of reference points across different artists, across different tunes, and it's not for nothing that everyone always says transcribe, transcribe, transcribe. I know it's not the easiest thing, but we have lots of solos on our channel. You can just pick one, try it for yourself, and you can compare it with what we got. It's an excellent practice. And finally, record yourself. That is one of the best self-evaluation tools you could ever have. If you have any thoughts or if you like these kinds of videos, let us know in the comments. I hope you found this helpful. I hope I've been able to make my case clearly enough so my message was clear. Like, subscribe, check out our Patreon. See you next time, and here's to becoming better musicians.